Mr. Prime Minister, great to see you.
Good to see you, Sean. Thank you.
I watched yesterday, and what I said on television last night is, this is history in the making. I thought it was very profound.
I think it was a historical meeting. It was a meeting of the minds and a meeting of the hearts.
Interesting. You know, it was interesting to watch the president say, you know, what a cherished ally Israel is, and you to say there's no better supporter of the Jewish people and the state of Israel than Donald Trump. And you've known him for how long? How do you know that?
I knew him from the time that I was serving as Israel's ambassador to the UN, and you know, we would sort of bump into each other here and there in New York City, but we've got to know each other over the years, and most recently, obviously. And look, we've always had a great alliance between Israel and America through successive presidencies. I feel we have now, as the president says, an even stronger alliance. A new day, he called it. Maybe a new age.
Yeah. I felt there was a cryptic message being sent. And I want to just actually read what you said here. For the first time in your life, for the first time in the history of your country, you said that the Arab countries, your neighbors in the region,
right,
do not see Israel as an enemy, but as an ally. And then President Trump talked about newfound, or you talked about newfound Arab partners. And he talked about maybe one state, maybe two states, but maybe a bigger deal, a more important deal. So I'm listening, and this is my take, is that you had once said that one of the benefits of the Iran deal, if there was only one benefit, is it brought you and your Arab neighbors together. So my read on this is that Israel now has a stronger relationship with the United States, maybe a strong relationship with Great Britain, but also Jordan, Egypt, maybe the Emirates, maybe Saudi Arabia, as that has never existed before. Is that true?
I think there's a change, and the change is coming because of the rise of radical Islam. Radical Islam has two fountainheads. One is the radical Sunnis led by ISIS, and before that by Al-Qaeda, and the radical Shiites led by Iran. The Arab countries are threatened by both. And when they look around and they say, well, who's going to help us against these twin threats? And they say, well, there's one country in the region that's powerful, that's determined, that's resolved to fight this common enemy, and that's Israel. So they don't view us anymore as their enemy, but increasingly they see us as their ally against the common threat. And I have to say that in my conversation yesterday with President Trump, he sees the things in the same way. That opens up opportunities, no question about it.
Can I get into it a little more deeply? What has happened in the interim? You have forged closer alliances. I know you can't divulge everything, but what can you tell us about these particular countries, the Saudis, the Egyptians, the Jordanians? Because I've got to believe none of those countries want Iranian hegemony in the region.
That's an understatement. They think Iran will cut their throats, and they're right.
They're right.
And they're right. And they are, you know, look, I had, in the great alliance between Israel and the United States, we've had our differences. We also had, and I got to give credit to President Obama, we had this memorandum of understanding, you know, of 10-year support for Israel. I appreciate that. But we also had our differences, and the most important difference was on Iran. The Arab countries sort of whispered things in the dark, you know, they wouldn't say it outright. I had to sort of speak out for everyone in the region. But right now, I think it's not merely in the region. People understand that Iran is a malevolent force, and the nuclear deal with Iran, if it's kept, the Iranians just walk in. The deal essentially said this. It said, no bomb today, 100 bombs tomorrow in 10 years. That's what it says. Because Iran can go for the enrichment of uranium, which is the key component.
That was only 2 years ago you said that.
Yeah, and it's happened.
March of 2015.
Now the assumption was, people had hoped, well, okay, we're kicking the can down the road, but this nuclear can of a single bomb then becomes the capacity to make dozens and dozens of bombs. And Iran doesn't change its attitude. In fact, since the signing of the deal, Sean, this is what has happened. Iran has become more aggressive, more deadly, sponsoring more terrorism, and in fact also
with more money.
With more money, a lot more money. And people are saying, wait a minute, this roaring tiger, if it's not stopped, it'll devour all of us. We're all prey to this militant Islamic regime that will arm itself with nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles that could reach you. They've killed Americans all over the place. They sponsor terrorism against Americans all over the place. Now they're going to build ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States and have the multiple warheads to do that. That's horrible. It's dangerous for America, dangerous for Israel, dangerous for the Arabs. Everybody now understands it. And there's an American president who understands it, and we're talking about what to do about this common threat.
You agree with me, radical Islam is the evil in our time.
Yes,
and Iran represents the biggest threat.
Because it would couple a radical Islamic regime with nuclear weapons.
That can't happen.
There could be evil that is not threatening because it doesn't have the powers of mass murder. But when you couple a radical Islamic regime that says death to America with the weapons of mass death, then you have a much, much bigger problem.
A squared, B squared, C squared. Radical Islamic terrorists, weapons of mass destruction, equals a modern-day Holocaust?
It's up to us to prevent it.
That's the important issue. It's the one thing the president said yesterday is that will not happen. And I'm just assuming with a new coalition that it would be very possible. I don't think a lot of people fully understand. I watched all these years since the Iranian Revolution in '79, death to America, death to America, death to Israel, burning the American flag, burning the Israeli flag. I think now, after all of the incidents of terror, but we have this whole immigration problem where so many refugees have gone to Europe, and parts of Europe have culturally shifted dramatically. And if you look at countries under Sharia that oppress women and they kill gays and lesbians, and there are 16 countries that don't accept Jewish passports. 16. And America is supposed to take in the world's refugee population. Explain, how does America and Europe, based on your experience in the region, how do they ascertain if they're taking in immigrants, if they're taking in refugees, whether or not ISIS will infiltrate the refugee population? How can you possibly vet what's in somebody's heart?
It's very hard to vet, but every country tries to, in one degree or another, tries to do that. And every country has to have the freedom to do so. And I won't get into your considerations of doing so, but I will say that, I'll say this, I'm a great believer in, in human exchanges and markets and so on, but I think it's very important to be able to prevent the infiltration of terrorists. That is, because terrorism is so disruptive, It doesn't necessarily kill that many people, although you suffered a terror attack that killed thousands of people.
I interviewed you, and you were one of our strongest allies at the time.
I remember that very, very well. That was a moment of great tragedy. So as the weapons become more sophisticated and more deadly, then the threat of terrorism becomes more deadly. And therefore the need to prevent terrorist infiltration becomes greater. And this is something that I think applies to all countries today.
The 1,000-pound bomb on a missile that Iran currently has can reach your country in less than 7 minutes.
Right.
It's pretty scary.
Yeah.
And I went to Israel.
But when they have ICBMs that could reach your country, and that's what they're working on right now.
That's what they're working on.
Remember, you're the great Satan. We're just the small Satan, they say, and we're just on their way. On their way to what? Henry Kissinger said, and I think very intelligently, he said, Iran is not merely a country. It's much more of a cause. It's a cause more than a country. What is that cause? It's global domination by their brand of radical Islam.
A caliphate.
It's more than that. They believe that they're destined to govern the world. Anybody who doesn't agree with them, they'll be able to subjugate or kill. And they're working on the means to achieve that. Their greatest enemy, they think, is the United States. They think everyone else is a derivative. And they're developing the capacity to deliver on their slogans, death to America and death to Americans in between. So we have a grand mission. And it's not a mission that we invent. We didn't invent these ICBMs. We didn't invent their nuclear program in which they seek to create nuclear weapons. We don't invent the terrorists that they send throughout the Middle East and the world. You know, Iran has a terror network of dozens and dozens of countries that they operate with their own operatives and their henchmen.
Well, they've been fighting proxy wars for decades.
But I'm talking about terrorist cells that they are building, planning them, preparing them throughout the world, in Asia, in Africa, in
Europe,
and in this
United
hemisphere.
States.
In this hemisphere as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty scary thought. You know, let me go to the Palestinian issue on this one point. You said, the president said one state, two state, maybe a whole new paradigm, and then talked about settlements briefly. It might be helpful not to for now. I don't want to harp on that point so much as I want to ask this. If this coalition can be built, does that solve that problem too?
Could help. Could help. Maybe it'll help.
Maybe absorb a population?
Begin to affect this persistent refusal to recognize Israel in any boundary, which is what is the source of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The reason it goes on is because the Palestinians continue to agitate for Israel's destruction. They don't care about this territory or that boundary or that settlement. They say everything is a settlement. Tel Aviv is a settlement. Jerusalem is a settlement. Haifa is a settlement. We have to get rid of everything. And I think that some normalization in the Arab world could help us begin to change attitudes there. But even if we did, and I think they have to come and recognize the Jewish state. I've said always, you know, you want peace? The first thing is you got to get rid of the thing that prevents peace. The thing that prevents peace is the persistent refusal to recognize the right of the Jewish people for a state of their own. That's what the Palestinians have to get rid of.
It's a simple precondition.
It's a simple.
They don't recognize your.
I don't say it's a precondition for talks, but if you want to end the conflict, that is a prerequisite for peace.
Now it's interesting. The Prime Minister.